All right, Justice and Correctional Services Minister Mike Massoutta yesterday launched the Nelson Mandela Rules. This was also part of a series of events honoring the late statesman. The regulations deal with the treatment of inmates globally. Minister Massoutta joins us now for more on this. Honorable Minister, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity.
All right, tell us more about the standard minimum rules being upgraded. You now call it the Nelson Mandela Rules. Let's discuss.
Yes, actually, some of the work of reviewing the rules was done on Robben Island itself under the leadership of, amongst others, Justice Mlambo, the Judge President of Gauteng, and of course adopted in December 2015 by the United Nations in New York. The purpose of reviewing these rules was to modernize them in keeping with new developments between 1955 and today. At an international level, there has been new human rights instruments that have been adopted, and many countries have since embraced those international standard-setting instruments in their own legislation, in their own constitutions, including our own. You would note that our own Bill of Rights, for example, contains a lot of the rights for persons under incarceration who are under detention, which include, amongst others, not to be subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment or punishment. So those are some of the developments in human rights standards in the world that are now finding expression in the revised rules.
All right, Honorable Minister, this issue has been on government's table since 2015. A lot of our viewers want to know why has it taken so long for it to get implemented?
Yeah. Well, upon the United Nations adopting these rules, various governments, including our own, had to go down into the business of ensuring that their systems are realigned and harmonized in keeping with the objects of the rules. Here at home, for example, not only the Department of Correctional Services has responsibilities under the standard rules, but the entire Peace and Stability Cluster has obligations flowing out of the rules. So it was necessary for a multidisciplinary effort to be embarked upon to ready the country to effectively implement in an intersectoral manner the imperatives of the rules. And this work has been ongoing, culminating in Cabinet endorsing the go-ahead that as a country we move in that direction a few months ago.
Okay, Honorable Minister, please permit me to dive in on this subject. How do we hold your department accountable? How do we hold you accountable? And how does the viewing public start to measure changes?
We have already been the subject of many injunctions through court orders. The Saldanha judgment, as it's famously known, that instructed us, for example, to bring down the numbers at Pollsmoor Prison in the Western Cape that you might be aware of 2 years ago, below the 150% occupancy level, is, for example, one way in which we have been subjected to scrutiny.
Okay. So overcrowding is an issue for South African prisons?
Certainly. The correction system in South Africa, the 243-strong correctional centers in South Africa are home to approximately 166,000 at any given day inmates, way in excess of the 120 100,000 capacity of our prison system. So our correctional facilities are inherently overcrowded in varying degrees, some exceeding 200% even. And that is not conducive for the kind of humane conditions that we would want to comply with in keeping with our own constitution, Bill of Rights, our own laws, and of course, clearly articulated in the minimum standard rules.
All right. Well, my colleague, Flo Latuaba, unfortunately, she's not here this morning. She's on assignment, but she really wanted me to go in on you and particularly ask you this question. The issue of violence and rape in prisons has continued unabated without any recourse for those affected. Now, prisoners have been suffering this issue of rape for so long, and no one's talking about it. How can one call these correctional facilities with that term, correctional facilities? How can you even call yourself a correctional facilities when no one is talking about or correcting some of these issues? Some of the inmates go into prison and they actually come out worse.
Well, there are disciplinary processes within our correctional facilities, but the issue of security in our prisons, if you like, has been the subject of great concern to us. We have started a process to deal with the matter comprehensively so that we address all the issues ranging from contraband in our prison system, our correctional system, to issues of assaults, whether between inmates or between officials and inmates, etc. We intend to, we're currently reviewing a proposed policy to introduce, for example, CCTVs inside our...
That's a great idea. And another question, why hasn't that been implemented many years ago?
Well,
that's an excellent idea.
Well, the complexity with it, of course, is that immediately you're talking about issues of privacy. So you need to find the right balance between respecting people's privacy on the one hand and ensuring that people are safe, and of course taking precautions that the system is not used or abused in the manner in which it's implemented.
All right. Let's talk about the subject of rehabilitation. Would you say our prisoners in South Africa are actually being rehabilitated? And if so, what programs are in place?
We have so many positive stories. There are people who have emerged out of our correctional system as role models, and we can go on listing names. We provide a wide range of development programs within correctional facilities or services, much to the envy of many out there. For example, we also, for purposes of our own self-sustainability and stretching our own rent, we do a lot of insourcing in terms of, or through our agricultural projects where we produce meat, eggs, and other agricultural products for our own nutritional requirements so that we do not have to rely on outsourcing some of these essentials. We use offender labor to do some of the maintenance of our facilities. You can imagine we have a very huge infrastructure, built infrastructure portfolio in terms of the 243 facilities that we have throughout the country. And that also affords us the opportunity to provide practical skills to our inmates. We have factories that manufacture furniture, which we sell to government departments. As part of community outreach, some of our inmates go out to refurbish school desks, court benches, or furniture. There's a new court, for example, that I'll be opening, a new local division for Mpumalanga in Middelburg, which was a rundown building that was refurbished through the use of offender labor, saving the state huge amounts of money from having to subcontract for or procure services externally, etc. So there is a lot that happens to empower inmates with skills, educational skills, educational opportunities included, but all not only aimed at providing skills to inmates, but also giving them opportunities to plow back to society that which they've taken away through their offending behavior.
Right. What would you say to accusations that some of the workers employed by your department are actually committing human rights abuses on some of the prisoners?
Well, we do take disciplinary action where such is uncovered. And as a matter of course, there has been a number of incidents. So one will not deny the existence of such. Obviously, through training, through conscientization, and other interventions, we ensure that the ethical standards that our officials uphold under very difficult circumstances. You'll understand that some of the inmates you're dealing with are your most violent criminals you can imagine. And that's why they are with us. So it is not an easy job, and it does come with its own stresses. And therefore, employee wellness is one of the areas that we focus some attention and some resources on, though not enough, given our limited resources. But we do our best to make sure that we invest in our human resources through training, through other programs for employee capacitation, as well as employee wellness generally.
So, Honorable Minister, let me ask you a rhetorical question. Do prisoners have human rights?
Oh, certainly.
Okay.
The only clear human right that an inmate does not have is their liberty. And some people may feel that we do not exact enough punishment on our inmates, given some of the atrocities that some of them have committed. We are a human rights-based society. We no longer run a prison system. We run a correctional system. And the purpose, by and large, is not to punish, but to correct offending behavior.
Okay. So, Honorable Minister, the question I'm getting at, if one of these prisoners are abused, how do they, again, hold you accountable? How do they hold the government accountable? How do they take it up in the court of law?
Certainly, is provision for a judicial inspectorate, which is currently headed by a retired judge of the Constitutional Court, which is responsible for going around all our correctional facilities, inspecting the conditions under which our inmates are treated, are incarcerated, and ensure that where there are violations, those are recorded and interventions are required or instructed on the part of management of these facilities. There's regular reporting on their findings, which reports are tabled in Parliament at least annually as required by the law. Those reports are provided to me, and that enables me to have a bird's eye view of what is going on in our correctional facilities, so that appropriate interventions and corrective measures, including consequence management, can be exacted.
All right, and before I let you go, these UN Mandela rules, are they bounded by law?
Well, of themselves are not binding law. But if you look at them closely, you'll find that they are a consolidation of many legally binding instruments, both internationally and even domestic law in many respects in different countries. I've already indicated that under our own constitution, for example, and the current Correctional Services Act, many of the norms and standards set out in the rules are already binding law, and we are obligated to comply therewith. What are the minimum? Well, and there is a reason why they cannot be a binding law. It's because they seek to set an ideal standard, be it at a minimum level, acknowledging that you cannot compare, for example, the situation in Scandinavian countries where some have described the jails there as hotels, literally. You look at the Netherlands, where we hear that 19 prisons have recently been closed because they're just not having enough inmates to keep in those prisons. We would love to be in that space as a country.
What is South Africa's problem?
We have high levels of violent crime because of the underlying socioeconomic conditions that are related to the legacy of our own history, which somebody celebrated to the dismay of many South Africans. We do not have an enviable legacy from our past, where, for example, because of black people having been marginalized socially and economically, you now have today crime and, of course, the prison population in South Africa having the face of a young person, of a black person, a male, all to do with the underlying socioeconomic, depraved socioeconomic conditions under which young black persons find themselves as they grow up in squalid conditions with inadequate provision that creates conducive conditions for offending behavior.
All right. I just have one more question. I don't want to just let you go. Sir, what is your proudest achievement till date when it comes to the prison system?
Well, there are many. Firstly, when I took office 4 years ago, I'm informed that the compliance with our parole conditions and conditions under community correction was around 85–86%. 3–4 years down the line, according to audited statistics, we are at 98–99%. It means that people that we release and the over 70,000 strong persons who are on our parole system and community correction offend less, are more compliant with our parole conditions generally, which include non-offending, to the tune of 98–99% 3–4 years down the line. I think that it's a huge achievement in the face of criticism that our rehabilitation programs are not working. There's high levels of recidivism. We can say, at least for those that we can account for, namely those that continue to be under our supervision because they are on parole or community correction, recidivism is at its lowest. That's just one of several achievements. I'll be going, for example, on Friday to Limpopo to unveil a project where, through offender labor, we have refurbished an entire residential facility for a school for the blind, thereby improving the living conditions for those learners so that they learn under conducive conditions. We've kickstarted this project last year where we targeted the 20+ special schools throughout the country. In January, when in Mthatha, we did the same thing, refurbished the beds, replaced the broken ceilings, fixed the walls, replaced broken windows. We have an Adopt a School project where at the start of every year, neighboring schools benefit from correctional facilities or centers who go out to do this kind of work as part of plowing back to society.
Honorable Justice Michael Masuta, thank you for joining us. And please, let's get that CCTV idea going. I really like that idea. I think that will solve a lot of problems, especially in the issue of rape, human rights abuses inside the prison.
We call it modernization. We're trying to look for opportunities for deploying modern technology to also deal with issues of shortage of staff because of our limited resources. So we're trying to be smarter in the use of our resources through, amongst other things, deploying modern technology platforms.